I never thought I'd live to see the man who once screamed that I was a worthless mistake, standing outside my office, begging me for mercy. But that's exactly what happened 15 years after he threw me out on the street, on my 18th birthday. The day started like a celebration should have. Balloons in the kitchen, a cheap cake from the corner store, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, my dad would remember I was his daughter, not his disappointment. But hope has a cruel sense of humor. I'm Haley Monroe, and the man I once called Dad, Richard Monroe, made sure that my 18th birthday would be the day I stopped believing in family. That morning, the house was unusually quiet. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air, the same way it always did when Dad came home late from the bar. I walked into the living room with a small smile. "Morning, Dad," I said softly, trying to sound cheerful. "It's my birthday today." He didn't look up. He just kept flipping through a pile of company papers, muttering numbers under his breath. I stood there waiting for even a flicker of acknowledgement. After what felt like a full minute, he finally looked up, and the disgust in his eyes made my stomach twist. "So?" he said coldly. "So, I thought maybe we could have dinner tonight? Just us?" I tried to keep my voice steady. He leaned back in his chair, a cruel smirk forming. "Dinner? You think I have time for that? Do you know how much money you've cost me? 18 years of bills, clothes, food, wasted." I blinked, stunned. "Dad, I didn't ask to be—" He slammed his hand on the table so hard that the mug toppled over. "Don't you dare talk back to me." The next few minutes felt like a nightmare unraveling in slow motion. He stood up, his face red with rage. "I wasted 18 years raising a mistake. You hear me? A mistake." My heart pounded against my ribs. "Dad, please, you don't mean that. I got accepted to college. I'm trying." "Trying?" He barked out a bitter laugh. "You think I'm paying for that? Not a chance. You want to live your own life? Fine. Pack your bags and get out." I froze. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I've never been more serious." He grabbed my old suitcase from the closet, shoved it into my hands, and stormed toward the door. "Dad, stop, please. Just listen," I cried, following him. He swung the door open so hard it hit the wall, and with one push, my bag hit the pavement. "You're 18 now," he said. "Legally an adult. So go live your big dreams, just not under my roof." Neighbors stepped out of their houses, pretending to check mail, but really watching every second. I felt my face burn with humiliation. One woman whispered, "Poor girl," but no one moved. No one helped. I looked back at him, tears blurring my vision. "Mom wouldn't want this," I said softly. His eyes turned to ice. "Don't talk about her. She died because of you." That sentence shattered something inside me that would never fully heal. My knees gave out and I fell to the ground, clutching my suitcase. He turned, slammed the door, and locked it. The sound echoed like a final verdict. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the door, waiting for it to open. It never did. Fast forward 15 years. I stand in a glass-walled boardroom 30 floors above downtown Chicago. The city stretches beneath me, glittering, powerful, unshakable. A place I built myself. The name on the frosted glass reads Monroe Holdings. The company once owned by the man who threw me away now belongs entirely to me. My assistant knocks softly. "Ms. Monroe, security has detained a man trying to force his way in. Says his name is Richard Monroe. He claims to be your father." For a second, my breath catches. The same voice that once screamed, "Worthless mistake," is echoing in the hallway, demanding to see me. I straighten my blazer and nod. "Send him in." The door opens, and there he is, older, weaker, eyes sunken with regret. For a heartbeat, the room feels frozen in time. "Haley," he whispers, "please, I'm your father." I look straight into his trembling eyes, the same eyes that once watched me walk away in the rain without a word. My voice is calm, measured, but every syllable carries 15 years of buried pain. "Fathers," I say, "don't abandon their children." He drops to his knees as security moves closer. The sight should feel satisfying, but instead it's heavy, like closure wrapped in sorrow. The story begins here, with the day I was thrown away and the moment I took everything back. People say your childhood shapes who you become. If that's true, then mine shaped me into someone who learned to survive love that felt like punishment. Before my 18th birthday, the day everything broke, I lived in a house that looked perfect from the outside. White fences, trimmed hedges, shiny cars in the driveway, but inside, it was cold. The kind of cold that didn't come from weather, but from silence. My father, Richard Monroe, was the kind of man everyone respected in public and feared in private. CEO of Monroe Holdings, a construction company known across the state. He had that polished charm, handshakes, fake smiles, and expensive suits, but at home, that charm disappeared the second he took off his tie. My mother, Evelyn, used to tell me, "Don't mind his temper, Haley. He just carries too much on his shoulders." She said it like she believed it, even when he yelled at her for burning toast or forgetting his briefcase. But when I was 6, she got sick. Lung cancer. By the time I was 7, she was gone. After the funeral, something in my father's eyes changed. The warmth that used to flicker when he looked at me vanished completely. For years, I tried to be the daughter he wanted. I cooked breakfast before school, he cleaned the kitchen before he came home, and kept quiet during his meetings. I told myself if I stayed small enough, polite enough, perfect enough, he might look at me and not see the girl who reminded him of everything he lost. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sneak into his office just to leave a drawing on his desk, a picture of us smiling together, something that never really happened. By morning, it would be gone. No note, no acknowledgement, just gone. Yeah, but still, I kept hoping. On weekends, I worked part-time at Della's Diner, wiping tables and saving every dollar I could. My dream was simple: get into college, study business, and maybe one day help run my father's company. I thought that would make him proud. I thought success could fix what love couldn't. There was one person who believed in me, Mrs. Callahan, my high school economics teacher. She saw how hard I worked, how quiet I was. One afternoon, she called me after class and said, "Haley, promise me something. Don't let your father's bitterness become your identity. You're more than someone's disappointment." Her words stayed with me, because deep down, I knew she was right. I was living my life trying to earn love that was never coming. Tupo. Week before my birthday, I gathered the courage to tell my father I'd been accepted to Midwest State University on partial scholarship. I walked into his office clutching the acceptance letter like it was gold. He was on the phone, shouting at someone about deadlines and contracts. "Dad," I said quietly, "can I show you something?" He covered the receiver, sighed heavily, and glared. "What is it now?" "I got into college. They offered me a scholarship. If I work part-time, I can pay the rest." He didn't even look at the letter. He just stared at me as if I'd told him a joke. "And who's supposed to pay for your food, your books, your failures?" I swallowed hard. "I'm not asking you for money, Dad. I just thought you'd be proud." "Proud?" His voice was like broken glass. "You think I'm proud to see my wife die and be left with a useless girl who ruined my life?" That moment, those words, burned into my chest. I remember gripping the paper so tightly it crumpled in my hands. I didn't cry, not then. I just nodded and said, "I'll figure it out." He waved me away like I was a stranger who overstayed my welcome. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the ceiling. My mother's photo hung on the wall above my desk. I whispered to her, "I'll make it, Mom. You'll see. I'll prove I was worth loving." That promise became my quiet fuel, the one thing that kept me moving. By then, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum filled with memories I wasn't allowed to touch. My father spent his evenings in silence, nursing his whiskey and watching the news. I spent mine studying, dreaming of leaving and wondering if freedom would hurt less than rejection. Yeah, the day before my 18th birthday, I woke up early, baked a small cake, and left it in the kitchen. I didn't expect him to celebrate, but part of me still hoped. I even wrapped a tie for him, a simple gesture to say, "I still care." When he walked in and saw it, he didn't smile. He just looked at the cake, then at me, and said, "You think this fixes 18 years?" I didn't answer. I just looked down and said, "It's not supposed to fix anything, Dad. It's just a thank you." He scoffed, grabbed his keys, and said, Don't bother thanking me. I did my job. You're still breathing." The door slammed behind him. I stood there for a long time, staring at the flickering candles on the cake until the wax dripped down the sides. I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow will be different." And it was. Just not the way I expected. When the front door slammed behind me that day, it didn't just end my childhood. It ended the version of me that still believed my father would ever love me. It was raining, thin, cold drops that felt sharper than they should have been. My clothes were soaked, my hands trembling as I clutched my old suitcase, the same one my mom used to pack for our road trips when I was little. The streetlight flickered overhead, and the neighbors who had come out to watch quietly disappeared inside, shutting their doors like I carried a disease. I remember standing there whispering, "Where do I even go?" That night, I found myself at the Greyhound bus station. The benches were hard, the air smelled of wet pavement and cheap coffee, and every few minutes an announcement would echo, reminding me how far I was from the life I used to know. I sat in the corner, hugging my suitcase, trying to convince myself this was temporary, that maybe by morning my father would realize what he'd done. He didn't. He never called. He never came. By sunrise, I'd spent my last few dollars on a stale bagel and coffee. I watched people board buses, mothers holding kids, couples holding hands, men in suits going somewhere important. And I sat there invisible, waiting for something to change. It didn't. For weeks, I bounced from one odd job to another, washing dishes, cleaning motel rooms, anything that would keep me fed. Eventually, I found a permanent spot at Martha's Diner, a small place off the highway that smelled like burnt toast and cinnamon coffee. Martha, the owner, was in her late 50s, tough voice, soft heart. She caught me one night wiping down tables long after closing and asked, "Don't you have a home to go to, kid?" I hesitated, forcing a smile. "I'm saving for one." She looked at me quietly, then slid a plate of pancakes across the counter. "Eat. Then you can mop the floor again if you still want to." That was her way of saying, "I know." Over the next few months, that diner became my shelter. I rented a small room above an old garage nearby. One bed, one window, no heat, but it was mine. I worked double shifts, saved every dollar, and spent nights at the public library using the free Wi-Fi to take online business classes. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on the keyboard, waking up when the janitor tapped my shoulder. Martha used to joke, "You'll burn yourself out, Haley." I'd smile and say, "Better to burn out than stay broken." Inside, though, the pain was heavier than I ever admitted. Every time I saw a father and daughter come into the diner, laughing over milkshakes, it twisted something in me. I'd glance away, pretending I didn't care, but I did. I always did. 2 years later, I finally enrolled in Midwest State University, the same one I told my father about. I paid my tuition in pieces, waitressing by night, studying by day. There were times I almost gave up, like the winter I couldn't afford heating, or the semester I skipped meals just to pay for textbooks, but every time doubt crept in, I heard his voice, "You're a mistake." And every time, I whispered back, "Watch me prove you wrong." Pain became my motivation. Failure wasn't an option, not anymore. By the time I graduated, I had no family, no backup plan, no one waiting at the ceremony. But I had something far more powerful: clarity. I understood that love doesn't always come from the people who are supposed to give it. Sometimes it comes from strangers who see you when you're invisible, like Martha, who showed up that day with a bouquet of cheap daisies. "You did it, kid," she said, hugging me so tightly I nearly cried. "Now go show the world who you are." And I did. After college, I got an internship at a mid-sized investment firm. At first, they barely noticed me. I was the quiet one who made coffee and took notes. But quietly, I learned. Every spreadsheet, every negotiation, every deal. I stayed late, asked questions, absorbed everything I could. When they finally let me handle my first client, I treated it like life or death. Within a year, I was the youngest financial analyst in the firm. Within 5, I became their top strategist. People started calling me the girl with fire in her eyes. They didn't know that fire came from standing in the rain with nowhere to go. Still, even with success, I never felt at peace. Every time someone mentioned the name Monroe Holdings, my stomach tightened. I'd hear whispers that the company, my father's empire, yes, was struggling. Some said he'd driven away investors. Others said karma had finally caught up. I told myself I didn't care, that I'd moved on. But every time I saw that name in the business section, I felt something stir. A mix of anger, sadness, and unfinished business. For years, I'd buried the hurt under achievements and titles. But when I heard the firm was considering acquiring Monroe Holdings, my heart stopped. 15 years had passed, and suddenly, the door I thought was locked forever was opening again. When my boss announced that our firm was preparing to acquire a failing construction company, I didn't even look up from my laptop until he said the name, Monroe Holdings. For a split second, my heart stopped. The pen slipped from my hand and hit the conference table glass with a faint clink. "Haley, you okay?" my colleague Jason asked. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just surprised. I've heard of that company." He laughed. "Everyone has. Used to be huge until Richard Monroe started running it into the ground." The room buzzed with talk of assets, debt ratios, and buyout potential. I sat there frozen, hearing only one thing, my father's name. After 15 years, it still hurt like a bruise that never healed. That night, I went home and opened my laptop, typing Monroe Holdings news into the search bar. Articles filled the screen. Monroe Holdings faces bankruptcy. CEO Richard Monroe under fire for mismanagement. His picture stared back at me. Older, grayer, but unmistakably him. The same cold eyes, the same arrogant half-smile. I leaned back, whispering to myself, so the empire finally cracked. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, but instead I felt something deeper, unfinished. Like life had just circled back, handing me a chance I didn't ask for but somehow needed. I stared at the company logo on my screen and whispered, "You took everything from me. Now I'll take everything you built." That night, I didn't sleep. I planned. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office. "Sir," I said calmly, "I want to lead the Monroe Holdings evaluation team." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure? It's a mess. Bad books, bad press, bad leadership." "I'm sure," I said. "Messy companies can be fixed if someone understands their foundation." He smiled. "You've got guts, Monroe." Hearing my last name from someone who didn't know its history sent a chill down my spine. A week later, I walked through the glass doors of Monroe Holdings for the first time in 15 years. The receptionist looked up politely. "Welcome, Miss Carter," she said, using my professional name, the name I'd chosen after marriage, the one that hid me from my past. The air smelled the same, old wood polish and ambition. But the building looked tired, hollow, almost like my father himself. As I entered the conference room, my chest tightened. There he was, Richard Monroe. Older, slower, but still trying to command the room. He looked at me briefly, then dismissed me with a glance, the way he used to when I was a child trying to show him a drawing. He didn't recognize me. "Let's begin," he barked. "I don't have all day." I smiled politely. "Neither do I, Mr. Monroe." Every time he spoke, I studied him. Not out of anger, but curiosity. His hands trembled slightly. His arrogance, though still alive, had cracks. For the first time, I saw the man behind the monster, weak, human. When the meeting ended, he walked past me. "You're new," he muttered. "What department?" "Investment and acquisitions," I replied. "I'll be evaluating the company's structure." He nodded absently. "Good. Maybe you can teach some of these idiots how to do their jobs." He kept walking, never realizing who he'd just spoken to. Over the next few months, I worked silently behind the scenes. I studied every document, every contract, every signature that bore his name. And the more I uncovered, the clearer it became. His empire wasn't collapsing because of bad luck. It was collapsing because of pride. He refused to modernize. He refused to listen. He refused to change. The same man who once told me, "You'll never make it on your own," was now drowning in his own stubbornness. I built a full recovery plan, financial restructuring, investor outreach, leadership transition. Every piece fit perfectly, except one, him. So I drafted a final recommendation. Company requires new ownership and leadership. Recommend acquisition and replacement of current CEO. When I submitted it, my hands were steady. My voice didn't shake. For the first time, I wasn't that scared 18-year-old girl anymore. I was the woman who learned how to stand without anyone catching her. 2 weeks later, my boss called me in. "Haley," he said, "your report is brilliant. The board wants to move forward. Complete acquisition within a month. They're offering senior leadership roles to our top strategists. Interested?" I smiled. "Actually, I'd like to buy a personal stake." He laughed, thinking I was joking. "You've been saving that much?" "Every bonus, every dollar, for 15 years, I said. "I know this company better than anyone." He leaned back, impressed. "All right, Miss Carter. Let's make it happen." The paperwork took weeks, but when the ink dried, my hands were signing something that changed everything. The ownership transfer was official. Monroe Holdings now belonged to Haley Monroe, my real name, my mother's name. When the secretary handed me the final file, she asked, "Should we inform the previous CEO?" I took a deep breath and said, "No, I'll tell him myself." That night, I sat alone in my new office, the one that used to be his. I opened the drawer and found a half-empty bottle of scotch, the same brand he used to drink at home. I poured one glass, not to celebrate, but to remember. I whispered, "Mom, I did it." I came back stronger. Then I looked out the window at the city lights, each one like a reminder that no matter how dark life gets, you can always rebuild. Tomorrow, I would see him again, and this time, he would know exactly who I was. The next morning, I arrived early. The sky over Chicago was gray, heavy with clouds, as if the universe itself knew something monumental was about to happen. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, the same one my father had ruled from for decades, and watched the city wake up. The skyline glittered faintly in the distance, cars moving like silent memories below. For a moment, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I could still hear his voice from that night 15 years ago. The shouting, the humiliation, the echo of his door slamming as I stood outside in the rain. But now, I was the one behind the door, and this time, I held the keys. Around 9 a.m., my assistant, Lydia, walked in nervously. "Ms. Monroe," she said, her tone hesitant, "there's a situation downstairs." I turned from the window. "What kind of situation?" "There's a man trying to get past security. He says he's Richard Monroe. He's demanding to see whoever's in charge." My chest tightened, but my face stayed calm. "Is he aware that he no longer owns the company?" "He was informed," she said quietly. "He didn't take it well." I nodded once. "Send him up." Minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and there he was, Richard Monroe. The man who'd thrown me out of his house, who'd called me a mistake, who'd taught me what it meant to survive alone. He looked smaller now. His once immaculate suit was wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled. The confident swagger he used to carry had been replaced by something almost pitiful, desperation. "Who the hell authorized this takeover?" he barked, ignoring everyone in the hallway. "I built this company with my own hands. I demand to speak to whoever's responsible." I stepped out of my office doorway. "That would be me." He froze. For a moment, he just stared at me, his eyes flickering with confusion, then disbelief. "Haley?" His voice cracked on my name like it physically hurt to say it. I gave a small nod. "It's Ms. Monroe now." He took a slow step forward. I didn't recognize you. You look different." "Success does that to people," I said evenly, "especially the ones no one believed in." He looked around as if trying to make sense of the room. "This can't be happening. You can't just buy my company." I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Actually, I can. You signed it away when you buried yourself in debt. I just happened to be the one who picked it up." His face twisted, with a mix of anger and humiliation. "You did this to me?" I tilted my head. "You did this to yourself. I just finished what you started." For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, in a tone that almost sounded like a plea, he whispered, "Please, Haley, I'm your father." That word, father, hit like a ghost from the past. It made the walls feel smaller, the air heavier. I looked at him, and for a brief second, I saw not the monster, but the man who once tucked me in before Mom got sick. But that memory vanished as quickly as it came. "Fathers don't abandon their children," I said quietly. "Fathers don't throw their daughters out on their 18th birthday. You lost the right to call yourself that a long time ago." His voice cracked, desperate now. "I made mistakes. I was angry. Your mother's death." I cut him off sharply. "Don't you dare blame her for what you did to me. You chose cruelty. You chose pride." He stepped closer, eyes wet. "Please, I have nothing left. I'm old, Haley. I just need a chance." I shook my head slowly. "You had 18 years of chances." Security entered the room quietly, waiting for my signal. Richard looked at them, then at me. "Haley, don't do this," he begged. "Please, I'm your blood." I took a deep breath, steady and calm. Blood isn't what makes a family. Actions do. Then, without raising my voice, I said to the guards, "Escort Mr. Monroe off the premises." As they gently took him by the arms, he resisted, shouting, "You can't do this. I built this place. You owe me respect." I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the marble floor, stopping just a few feet from him. "You're right," I said. "You did build this place, but you also built the person who took it from you. Every insult, every slap, every night you made me feel unwanted. That built me. So yes, you created this moment. Congratulations." The entire floor had gone silent. Employees stood frozen, pretending not to watch but unable to look away. As the elevator doors closed on him, he shouted one last time, "Haley, please don't do this." I didn't answer, because sometimes silence says everything words never can. When he was gone, the room stayed still for a moment. Lydia whispered, "Are you okay?" I turned toward the window again, my reflection overlapping with the city skyline. "I'm fine," I said softly. I just finally finished a story that began 15 years ago. For a long time, I stood there watching the rain streak down the glass, the same rain that once fell on me the night he left me in the street. Only this time, I was warm, dry, and free. The building was quiet after he left. For the first time in my life, silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I stood there for a while, staring at the closed elevator doors, realizing that the man who once defined every part of my pain was finally gone from my world. Not because I ran away this time, but because I stood my ground. That moment didn't feel like revenge. It felt like freedom. Later that evening, when the office emptied and the city lights blinked awake, I sat alone in the chair that used to belong to him. The nameplate on the desk still said Richard Monroe, CEO. I ran my fingers across it once, then quietly placed it in the drawer. I had replaced him, but I wasn't him. I looked around the office. The polished wooden shelves, the dusty family photo tucked between files. It caught my attention because I'd seen it before. I picked it up gently, wiping the glass with my sleeve. It was a picture of me, maybe 4 years old, sitting on my mother's lap while my father stood behind us, hand on her shoulder, smiling proudly. The photo was sun-faded, almost forgotten. My throat tightened as I whispered, "You kept this?" For a brief second, I imagined that somewhere inside him there had once been love, buried under pride, grief, and years of bitterness. But I also knew something else. Love that's hidden behind cruelty doesn't deserve a lifetime of forgiveness. I placed the photo back on the shelf, not to remember him, but to remind myself of who I had been, the little girl who refused to give up, even when the world turned its back. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Martha, the woman who'd once given me pancakes and hope when I had neither. She'd written, "Heard the news, kid. You did it. Proud of you. Now rest. You've earned it." I smiled through tears. For 15 years, that woman had been more of a parent than my own blood ever was. That night, I didn't go home right away. I walked through every floor of the building. The corridors where employees worked nervously under my father's shadow, the offices that once echoed with fear. I wanted to change that. The next morning, I called a company-wide meeting. When everyone gathered, I looked around at the tired faces, accountants, engineers, assistants, people who had given years of loyalty to a man who barely noticed them. I spoke clearly, my voice steady. I know this company has seen better days. I know some of you are afraid of what comes next, but let me tell you something. Fear ends today. Whispers rippled across the crowd. I don't want this to be a place built on pride and control, I continued. I want it to be built on purpose and respect. From this day forward, Monroe Holdings isn't about one man's ego. It's about rebuilding something real, together. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was genuine. For the first time in years, hope returned to that building. Following months, we transformed everything. New projects, new ethics, new culture. I hired interns from foster programs, donated to shelters, and funded scholarships for homeless youth. Every name on that scholarship list reminded me of who I once was. The girl with no home, no safety net, no father waiting at the door. When reporters later asked about my motivation, I simply said, because no one should have to earn the right to be loved. Months after taking over, I received a letter. No return address, just my name written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a short note. Haley, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that losing everything made me see what I truly lost years ago. Your mother would be proud of you. I never was the father you deserved. R. I read it twice. My chest felt heavy, but not angry, just tired. I placed the letter in the same drawer with the old photo, not as a keepsake, but as closure. Some wounds don't heal with time. They heal when you stop reopening them. That night, I drove to the lake where my mother used to take me as a child. The water shimmered under the moonlight, calm and endless. I sat on the bench and whispered, "It's over, Mom. I kept my promise. I made it." The wind blew softly, brushing my hair back like a quiet blessing. Now, when I walk through the halls of Monroe Holdings, employees greet me with warmth instead of fear. The company thrives again, but not because of profits, because of people. I often look at the gold letters on my office door. Haley Monroe, CEO. Every time I see that name, it reminds me that pain can either destroy you or rebuild you. And I chose the latter. I forgave him, but I never forgot, because forgetting means erasing the lesson that made me who I am. Before the screen fades to black, my voice would close the story in narration. Some people wait their whole lives for an apology. I stopped waiting. I built my own closure, and in doing so, I found peace not by getting even, but by getting better. The final frame would show me standing by the office window again. Same view, same city. But this time, the reflection staring back isn't a scared girl anymore. It's a woman who turned pain into power. If this story touched your heart, remember this. Sometimes life takes everything away just to show you how strong you really are. Haley's story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming power. It's about learning that the greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's proving yourself right. We all carry wounds that were never our fault, but healing, that's our choice. So if you've ever been abandoned, underestimated, or called not enough, let this story remind you that you can rise again. You can rebuild. You can become everything they said you couldn't. If you felt something while watching this video, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs strength tonight, and comment below what part hit you the hardest. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful emotional stories like this. Stories that turn pain into power and silence into strength. Because somewhere out there, someone's story, maybe yours, deserves to be heard next.